Welcome to Resilience Radio Zoom edition. Whitney Rencountre.
Yes.
So
Thanks for having me.
I have been watching you since they canceled every powwow on the whole planet for the next 20 years, it feels like. So I came across you because you're an admin for the social distance powwow group. And that group has saved me. In a weird way, it saved me.
Wow, that's great. Great to hear. Thank you for being part of the movement.
But is it a movement, or is it just like a bunch of our friends on the internet dancing?
Yeah, I mean, it is whatever each individual member makes it, you know. But we call it a movement because of how fast it caught on and how many people joined so quickly, and it's really nothing we can control. It's kind of become something that's on its taken on a life of its own.
Well, I know my reasons of why powwows are important, but why are powwows important? Or what are some of the things people have said about why this is so important and big that what you're doing?
Well, personally, I'll start there. I come from the Crow Creek Sioux tribe, central South Dakota. And my grandfather, he was a drum keeper. He's an artist. He was a veteran. He was a traditional dancer, you know, and he sang a lot of old songs that passed down from generation to generation. And when, you know, my grandfather had 6 daughters, no sons, and he couldn't pass down the ways of the drum to his daughters, because traditionally you can. I mean, as a family drum, you have the right to allow women to sit at your drum if it's only confined to your family. But he had a community drum, so and his uncles and father and grandfathers, they all sang with the community members back in our old Fort Thompson, South Dakota area. And so my grandfather, when us grandsons were born, it's like he was born again. And all of a sudden, he brought out all of his crafts, and he would sit us down when we were little kids and just start singing with us. And he would make us all of us regalia. My grandmother, my grandfather. He would take us to all the powwows, the local celebrations, and drive all night to get there, drive all night to get home and go to work. And it just became a way of life. And that's what really instilled. I was the only one out of the grandsons that really took it on and has brought it to my life. And as a singer, as a now turning into a powwow Emcee, you know, it's for those of us that have powwows are instilled in us. It's, even though we don't hunt the buffalo anymore, we don't gather the foods like we used to. That's when the songs and the dances were important, when we celebrated, when we had feasts long ago. Of course, we didn't do competitions. We didn't have like powwows per se. But when we went to the reservations, it's what we adapted to. We didn't want to lose the songs and the dances, so we started adapting them to the reservations. And so that, for me, is one of my motivations for this page. And I think for everybody else, everybody has their own experience, you know. And I think, you know, go ahead.
Oh, I died a little because of the social aspect. Because that is who's at this powwow, who's going to be, you know, the community of it, who's dancing, who's emceeing, the busybody of the powwow. So removing the only social thing I do, you know, for this quarantine really, really, really killed me. So being able to see, oh, so-and-so just posted, or, ooh, so-and-so singing, or, oh, girl, my girl's up, you know, I feel like part of something again. I have my friends back.
Yeah.
So I can snoop around, like, what's for sale? What you guys got? Hey.
Yeah. Yeah, that's your experience. And I'm sure if we brought on other members,
Yep.
They would all give their experiences as well.
Well,
I think that's it.
And to feel like there's a continuance of something, that this time something hasn't been lost or broken to quarantine. You know, we still have something, and that kind of think gave a lot of people peace too, you know.
Yeah. I think early on, what some things pulled at my heartstrings early on I remember one day when the first week or a couple weeks, there was a young man that came on to the social distance powwow page, and he just had a live feed going, and he was sitting like in his attic, and he had his drum out, sitting there by himself. And he said after everything that's been going on in the world, he's been feeling bouts of depression. He's been feeling suicidal. And he said when he came on the social distance powwow page and he saw people posting songs and dancing in the living room and outside their front yards, he said it inspired him. And so he pulled out his drum and he went live too. And while he was on that live feed, you could just see his demeanor change.
Aww.
You could sense it in his voice that he found some place to land, gave him some hope. And I think that's what we need sometimes when we're feeling depressed or suicidal. We need hope to hang on in this world and to find something to live for. And, and then everything from there, from hearing a 100-year-old grandmother who's bedridden and can't go to powwows anymore. But at the touch of a screen, they can feel like they're at powwows again, just stories like that kind of like, wow, this is bigger than all of us.
Well, there's that other weird thing that happened was that everybody posting their sobriety celebrations. That's crazy.
Yeah. Indian Country Today ran a story on that, and at first I was like, what the heck, it almost seems too. Almost every week it's something different, but I think it was like we were like or maybe 9 weekends in a row of social distance powwow. And by this time I was feeling burnt out because I'm kind of the one. We have 3 co-founders. We all have different jobs, but I'm the one in charge of all the content, the live content, inviting the guests on and getting the singers to come on. Yeah, it's busy, a lot of work. Plus I do the graphics for all the posters to promote them, and I'm the MC. It's like I put all my heart and soul into it. But one weekend I said, you know what, I want a relaxing weekend. I want to take some time for myself. So I'm just going to do one show. It'll be a powwow weekend. I'll bring some singers on, but I found some singers that I knew that were sober and that really connected to the traditions of the values of what a singer is supposed to be. There's no drugs and alcohol that are allowed at our powwows, especially around the drum. And when you're dancing your regalia, you're supposed to be drug and alcohol free. And so I was thinking to myself, because when you use drugs and alcohol at the powwows or at the drum, or when you're wearing your regalia, you invite so much negative to our culture and to our families, our communities. And so I wanted to get back to the basics. So I called that show Songs, Spirituality, and Sobriety. And I had these guys, and we were all talking about our different journeys as singers and sobriety. And then I was like, wait a minute, I think I might have started all these sobriety posts with that show. I mean, not myself, but as guests, we all were talking.
Yeah, the topic.
Yeah, the topic did. And I think that's what invited it on. But I mean, by no means was I trying to invite everybody to share, although in the end, we realized we couldn't stop it. It was just bombarding. People were getting frustrated. They weren't too happy that everybody was posting about their sobriety posts, but that's just a very few people. The majority. What's that?
I thought it was great because we suck at alcohol. We are very bad at doing drugs too. We're just not.
It's not in our DNA. Yeah, it's highly addictive in our personalities as Indigenous people. It's not in our DNA because our ancestors didn't live that way. So, but yeah, I mean, to me, it's just like, that's why I call it a movement, because it just kind of, whatever catches on and whatever happens, whatever we kind of plant and whatever we feed is what shows up. And in reality, sobriety maybe it's boring to some people, but to the majority of people, that's how we get our lives back in order.
Well, we've all lost somebody, or we've all watched somebody struggle, or we've struggled ourselves. So to me, that topic is integral to keeping our culture intact, because they used alcohol against us from the beginning.
Yeah.
So to be sober or to come out of addiction is a huge deal that should be honored.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus, people look way better in their sober selfies than they, do some of the other ones. Just be honest. Y'all look better when you're sober.
Yeah, that's true.
So beyond social distance powwow, you're one of them edumacated engines. You have
Yeah.
you have a bachelor's in American Indian Studies. Now, I didn't know until 2005 that a native could take native studies. It would be like a Mexican taking Spanish. I didn't know we were allowed to. So the fact that there's so many of y'all out there keeping our story straight is a big deal.
Yeah.
You're telling
Well,
our story.
well, the thing about it is we grow up on a reservation. A lot of us do, some of us don't, but there's over 600 different tribes. Not even our ancestors knew about the 600 other tribes. So American Indian Studies, you're not just learning about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tribes. You're historically there was over 600 different tribes. So even getting a bachelor's degree in American Indian Studies, you're still touching the iceberg. And K through 12 education in America, you're getting maybe a couple paragraphs, if you're lucky, throughout your K through 12 education about all indigenous people, unless you take an independent study or you take your own time to go to the library to learn. But for the most part, none of us learn about our ancestors and our people unless you have oral stories and traditions and you grow up in a traditional home. So it's so important, especially with what's going on right now with the racial divide. I mean, if in America, if we took the time to learn about the cultures, and if it was mandatory and we had to test on it, it would create so much more avenues for better understanding. People think Indians get free things. There's so many prejudiced things that happen in our country because there's nobody telling the truth.
Well, here in California, they do the big portion of Native American studies in fourth grade. Fourth grade. How much magnitude and depth and blah, blah can a fourth grade, what are they, 9, 10, comprehend? And then you forget that. It seems intentional almost to just stick it somewhere that nobody would remember.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
paragraph, oh, we had slavery, but then we didn't. Hooray. There's no in depth of the treatment of slaves before and after. It's, do you think that because of this lack of education is keeping this weird unintentional racism alive?
Well, it's sure feeding it, you
Okay.
know, as indigenous peoples, we understand that. But I think as human beings, we're most of the time in the society today, we're pretty lazy. We don't like to take the time to learn. We don't like to take the time to take the initiative to learn. So we will get our education from John Wayne.
It's
Or
Google.
yes, or we'll get our education from Pocahontas or from the Disney, or you can go down the line. Hollywood has had a big impact. Same thing with the national sports and the sports teams across the nation using mascots. I mean, you can go down the line. So in reality, I kind of look at that and I realize, for the most part, as human beings, we're all kind of living and we're controlled by the narrative in America. And so for the most part, a lot of us are going to work, coming home, or whatever our daily jobs are, raising our children, taking care of our families, or not, or we're going to parties and just kind of living that life. But in reality, without education, it'd be very hard to get out of what we're in right now. So that's why I chose education, because I'm able to work with a lot of youth. I went back to the reservation and I taught Indian studies for a couple of years. And I saw some light bulbs go off in a lot of kids. Learn like, wait a minute, why didn't I know about all of these things historically? Why didn't I know about the Wounded Knee Massacre? Why didn't I know about the American Indian Movement? Why didn't I know about the Dakota Wars, in Minnesota, And I didn't know that traditionally our ancestors were so hard workers, and there was no orphans because there was always family members taking care of our children. We were living green before green was popular. We were living
invented
abundant.
green.
Yeah, exactly.
Why do we wear so much red, man?
Yeah. But I mean, so education is so important to teach and to, I mean, in reality, if we let the American standard teach us for the rest of our lives, there's really going to be no change. So we as Indigenous peoples, we got to be taking these jobs as administrators so we can retell these stories and make it mandatory,
Well,
and that's, go ahead.
well, you are an American Indian Studies major, so you know more about assimilation and the process and the steps and the psychology of assimilation. So you have to kind of counteract that in a way. They don't want us together, but you made social distance powwow that brought us together. They don't want us to know the truth in the history, but here you are blabbing the truth in the history. So
Yeah.
you're yeah, I guess it is a movement. You are kind of take this government, but
Yeah.
in such a sweet, gentle, like calm way. Like all we're doing is dancing and singing, and it's affecting people.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, exactly. I think in reality, we're not responsible what colonization did to us. We're not responsible for that, but we are responsible for our own healing. We are responsible for our own lives. We can sit back and say, "Oh my goodness, it's the government's fault," or it's what they did to our ancestors. We can play that all we want, but in reality, no one's going to do anything about it except for ourselves. We can sit back and wait for them to change and try to shame them into changing, but they're not going to change. We have to make the change ourselves. And I think when we realize that we can leave the reservation and we can get a job and we can work hard, we can make a difference in this world. We can make our own companies. We can make our own page called Social Distance Powwow, and 190,000 people will join in. A prime example. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And one of our goals as Social Distance Powwow is to make our voice heard, to make ourselves visible in a world that we're not very visible because of the narrative that they've written for us. So it's time for us to start writing our own narrative.
Well, what gets me is when non-natives argue with the native about history. Like, we were talking about mounds. I was talking to another tourist casually about my Choctaw mounds and Cahokia mounds and other things. And I said, well, they're burial mounds, blah, blah. Well, no, they're not, because they didn't find any bones. Who didn't find bones? The archaeologists. Okay, I'm telling you that we used mounds like this to prepare and bury our dead. No, you didn't. Because there wasn't a placard that said this happened. This person could not accept that I said it happened. It's like,
Yeah.
so I feel like it's always an uphill battle.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. We're fighting against over 100 years of American education, and it's going to take a while. We took us 100 years to get here. It's going to take us a long time unless we fast track that by telling our own stories and getting our own evidence, like the Bering Strait. Another example, they think we all came over from the Bering Strait.
Nope.
And that's what all the archaeologists showed them, so on and so. It was a theory, but they believed it. But I went to Washington, D.C., and went to the Smithsonian Museum, and they have a kind of a extra place where they store all the stuff that's not on shown yet, or that's not on display yet. And so we went. It's in Maryland. You got to go on a bus, and you got to get out of there, and it takes you just right across the Maryland state line. It's just pretty close still. But we found some duck decoys thousands of years BC in a cave in Nevada that were made by our ancestors. And that's just a tip of the iceberg right there. The evidence is coming. In reality, traditionally, we would never dig those up. But they were dug up by the archaeologists, and they found more evidence. But the fact that this stuff isn't being shown, I mean, it might take decades before that proof is actually taught in a school setting.
But they need us to be savage, primordial. They need us to be cavemen and useless people to justify the takeover, I think. I think the guilt of murdering 10 million people with law, justice, science, blah, etc., would make them feel terrible. So they need us to remain, thank you, Mr. White, that kind of subhuman.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. They have
But
a
think
narrative
about
to
this.
to
We don't want to guilt people, right? We're not trying to guilt or shame all these ancestors, right? And descendants of Columbus. What? So I think people feel that way, but what is our intent is just to share our history.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, if you try to shame people, you're going to be met with resistance. Then 90% of your experience in life is going to be met with power struggles. Who can holler the loudest? Who can so on and so forth. So in my life, when I got some healing from my own self after I left the reservation, I got an education. I was the first male in my family to go to college to get an education, and so from there I started working for a youth program in my community, and we work with all the students that come from the reservation that moved to Rapid City, and a lot of them are living with people living on couches, are homeless, and they're going through a hard time living in our city, in Rapid City here. And so we're there to mentor them, to tutor them, to give them transportation, to help them find food, resources. And we've been doing, and this program has been going for the last 26 years now in our community. It's called the Ate Api Youth Mentoring Program. And that for me, it's like, man, I'm blessed to have this job because we help a lot of students in our community. And when we see them making changes, then their goals change. They stop thinking about, what do I do to get by today? How do I survive today? They start thinking ahead, and how do I become a lawyer? How do I become a doctor? How do I become an administrator? Or how do I just take care of my family? Or how do I do something different than what I had it? So you see all these, the demeanor changing in a lot of our youth and our students, and that I like that because that's what happened in my life, and that's how I started to make changes. So through a lot of the healing and my own work on myself, I started to realize, it's more important for us to be at the table where the decisions are being made. And if we can be at the table, we can tell our story. We can be in the places to make these decisions. We wouldn't have to rely on them to make the decisions for us. And so I think
And the
that
things
knowledge
we
is
want,
power.
but the things we want, though, are good for everybody. We're not
Yeah.
saying we want
Yeah.
to dig oil or we want to set things on fire or we want to build strip mall. Like what we want helps and benefits everybody.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's just it. I think our culture is family, tioshpe, our tiwahe, the importance of our family and taking care of our people. Whereas the Caucasian culture is more about individualism. How do I get ahead? What's the American dream? So on and so forth. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I think that's where we as indigenous peoples, we are told that we are wrong. So we attack back with saying, no, you are wrong. But in reality, we can't change. We can't change other cultures, and in reality, we just have to advocate. I always say when I talk to people, and a lot of like as an MC, I always say I'm not trying to convert, and we don't want to convert any of you to believe in our way. All we're asking is that you have a better appreciation and that you respect our beliefs. Don't try to change us. Don't come to our doors trying to change us and convert us. Don't try to sell us on things that we don't want. Just allow us to be us and provide a space for us in our communities and our cities across America. And quit thinking that our culture is bad, because that's what they told you. That's what they told you. So I think that's another thing about the social distance powwow is people are watching our songs and dances that because of their religious beliefs maybe would never go to a powwow. But now that they're seeing the songs and dances and they're saying, wait a minute, this is all it is? Why did they tell me that it was bad? Or why did I think it was bad when I heard the drums or heard these dancers? You know what I mean? So it's opening more doors and it's creating more opportunities for change.
But we have religious Indians. We have our, many, a high percentage of our indigenous families are Christian or some kind of marked religion. And I don't think that our singing, our dancing, our prayers, our ceremonies take away from any religion. I think they're just like an additive. Like if you believe in
Yeah.
this God, cool, here's another way to pray. If you believe in what
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to conflict to me with any religion. It blends just fine. We're all praying and wanting the same things.
Yeah. You're right. You're right with that. What I would say, and I'm telling you, what I'm telling you is exact the research I've done personally. I actually have gone to community people in my community, surrounding areas, and asked them personally, why don't you go to a powwow? And these are the responses I get, because I think of it like going to another church. As Americans, everybody's so territorial. You don't want to go, you don't want to mess with them because they're Democrat, or you don't want to mess with them because they're Republican, or you don't want to mess with them because you can go down the line. We're so divided. And so the powwows are the same way until we can get past that kind of that mentality that it's like going to something and you're going against something. Or when you go to a powwow that somehow somebody has to hold your hand and show you and make you feel welcome. That's just not the way it is. You got to take your own vested interest and learn if you want change. If you want to be a leader in our community, I tell people that you got to start making these changes now and stop feeding the narrative.
But it's not, I don't think that we intentionally feed the narrative. We just don't see how far can I reach as a Native woman? That's a realistic question I have to ask myself. Is it pointless to apply at CBS or NBC? Of course, because they don't have anybody like me, which shows me they don't want anybody like me. So I don't think it's an intentional feed the narrative. I think some of us have just accepted the narrative.
Once again, we're lazy human beings, and until somebody changes, until so on and so forth, until someone tells us to do it or makes us do it, or until people start protesting and filling the streets and showing you that we want change, we it's like we're more of a react to things rather than getting out of our own comfort zone. It's like it takes something like COVID-19 and George Floyd, and you can go down the line for these kinds of big events to happen before we finally start to see a change happening, and then we get back to normal again, our new normal.
Be consistent with starting our own change and continuing to be our own change.
Yeah.
So instead of coming out of the woodworks to protest with everybody else protesting, we should just always be protesting.
Well, after a while, that's gonna get tiresome, and people will stop paying attention. So you can't do it all the time, just like with anything. And I think that's one thing about our culture is our ancestors were so smart. They say you got to have balance in life because you got to take care of yourself. If you're protesting all the time, who's at home taking care of your children, or who's teaching, or who's doing the things that are supposed to be done in our lives? Who's at ceremony? Who's doing all these things? So there has to be a balance, But I think in essence, I think that's one of the good things about protesting is it does it's something, the people that have been oppressed in our country, it gives us the ability to stand up and say, you know what, I'm tired of being oppressed. I'm tired of being colonized. I'm going to do something about it, and I'm going to stand up for a cause that I believe in, But I always tell people you can do all those things, and it's important to do those things, but it's always good to remember to come home and take care of yourself too, because you got to heal from some of that. Sometimes you're going to be up against direct action. You're going to be up against trauma. So you got to maintain the integrity of who you are. Once again, you got to take care of yourself so that you don't fall into that trap of hate, And so
it's an easy trap to get stuck in. Now, you mentioned colonization a few times. What is the concept of decolonization, or what is colonization? We throw that term out a lot, and I kind of want to break it down to some of our listeners to understand what we don't want everybody to go barefoot and back to the bow and arrow. That's not what we're saying, right?
Yeah. You know what? I always keep it simple. I keep things simple because it was like leaders such as Sitting Bull, the Standing Rock Nation. He said, take the good of the other cultures or the other beliefs and discard the bad things. And so what that means is essentially colonization isn't completely a bad thing, but there are a lot of bad things about the concepts of what it did to our ancestors. And a lot of people used colonization to deem us evil. And so we always talk about, historically, we live closer to Grandmother Earth. Historically, we live closer to the spirituality of who we are. And that's the gifts that our ancestors had. We understood, the Milky Way, that's where we go home to. We understood the concepts and the connection of our place in this world. Colonization is more something that led us to industrialization, led us to become factory workers. It led us to that the Indians had to be saved, kill the Indian, save the man. All these concepts came from colonization. But in reality, is the social distance power Facebook page part of colonization? Yeah. But you know what? It's not a bad thing. It's okay. It's a place. Once again, just like the things I told you at the beginning of this segment, there's a lot of positives that come from it too, just like anything. So spirituality, you can talk about there's a lot of great things about spirituality, the connection of our grandfathers and our ancestors had. But it's really hard to sell that to a Caucasian person or somebody that doesn't know a lot about spirituality. It's not something that was passed down from their ancestors, although there are places in Europe before they were colonized that there are healers that lived in their mountains. That the burning times in Europe, when I myself first found sobriety, I remember learning about the burning times in Europe where they burned thousands and thousands of women that knew the healing plants, yep, that knew the powers of our creator, that knew the traditional medicines, but they were deemed evil by some people that stood behind their religion. And so that trauma of forcefully deeming things evil and getting rid of them has come from a historical point in Europe. And that's what followed them over here. That's what followed them all across the world to conquer the rest of the world. And when we learn about those things as indigenous peoples, we're like, wait a minute. Wow, it wakes us up and it gives us a passion to live and to change our lifestyles, and so we have to find that power within ourselves and understand that colonization is a term that's used because that's what was used to conquer our ancestors, but not everything about it is bad, because in reality, we always talk about there's good and bad in every culture, every religion, every community, even our own. Yeah, every person, we all choose. So it's not that colonization or religion are bad. It's just that certain people in power use those to conquer and to influence other people in a negative way. And so, but there are also a lot of good people along the way as well, but it's up to us to make our own. That's why I say you got to stop thinking about things, like that some, like an Indian that's educated, oh, he's assimilated, or so-and-so that did this, or they're that. They think they're better.
Abandoned.
You know what I mean?
I've heard them all.
Yeah, exactly. Or somebody living in the city, they're urban Indians, so they don't, they're not like us traditional ones that live on a reservation. See, we always find ways to divide. We always find a way to bring each other down, but that's a result of colonization. Because our ancestors didn't do that to each other. Our ancestors, they kept each other humble, and humility was important. But at the same time, we led by example. Our ancestors led by example, so they made each other stronger. They made each other, as a community, as a whole, we were stronger. That's why there was never any orphans. I mean, can you imagine the beauty and all that and what our ancestors lived? A lot of people talk about that our ancestors were always fighting. There was always war against tribes, so on and so forth. Well, shucks, why were there 100 million of them? And why were there only 250,000 of them left at the end of the 1800s? You can't tell me that that's a result of the wars amongst tribes. When Columbus landed, there was around 100 million of our ancestors. They were thriving. you know. So but once again, these facts are not being taught, not even today. So
Can't admit on the record in a history book that these Europeans came over here and decimated a functioning, thriving society. You can't do that. You have to lay the foundation that, oh, they were going to mess it up anyways. We did them a favor.
Yeah, true. Yeah, the justification.
So when you are working with your youth, how do you spark them that it's not one way or the other? Like, do you see? Because I've always, I again, grandma was boarding school, so she put that into dad put it into me. So even on social distance powwow, I'm so paranoid to sing a song. Who's gonna get mad at me? I'm so paranoid to do anything because you don't show anybody, they're gonna kill us all. There's still that mentality that I have to fight through. How native can I be today? So how do you break kids out of that stuff that we've had beaten into us?
Well, to me, it has to be natural. You have to feel comfortable when you do it. And I say that because I think in reality, it has to be an everyday thing for you. Not just you, but I mean, we tell this to our students. You have to be comfortable singing. You have to be comfortable dancing, speaking the language. And you have to realize you're going to get ridiculed along the way, because that's what the headmasters at the dormitories or at the boarding schools did to our grandparents. They ridiculed them. They punished them, you know. And so I think in reality, we get past that by getting comfortable in our own skin. And I think when we connect to these songs and these dances, and all of a sudden you start feeling something happening. You start feeling your body or your spirit speaking to you. And, you know, I always say that there's no better feeling than when you're singing an awesome song with the rest of your brothers around the drum, and you have your wives around the drum singing with you guys, same thing when you're on the dance floor and you're dancing with your sisters, your brothers, your aunties, your uncles. And I mean, for me, I haven't experienced it yet, but I've heard so much that when a grandmother or grandfather is watching their grandchild dance or sing, I've heard there's no better feeling than that, because a lot of times our elders at that point, they can't dance or sing anymore. So when they see their grandchildren out there, it fills them with life. And
I'm like tearing up right now.
Yeah, I mean, I say that because when I was a little boy, my grandfather first sat me at the drum. We could barely walk, we could barely sing, but I have some pictures when I was learning how to sing with we were sitting there holding our ear, and we had our hats and we were singing. And as I was singing the more and more, it's like all of a sudden my grandmother, she would be sitting in the living room when we were singing. And as I was getting older, I just remember like looking for my grandmother to see if she liked the way I was singing. And I remember looking, and all of a sudden after a while, she'd be like, "Grandson, you're the best singer I've ever heard. That's the best song I've ever heard." And I think when we get that acknowledgement as a child, it gives us the courage as we get older. And then we go through adolescence, and we pick on each other, we ridicule each other, and so on and so forth. But I think it is important. It's so important for us as parents, as family members, to create safe places in our homes. Because if we just let our children be raised in the streets, we let our children be thrown out to the world without teaching them a safe a home that's traditionally based, or at least has some of the traditional values of all people, all good people, then they'll have nothing to compare all the bad things they experience on the streets or in the world. So you got to have that foundation. And I was one of the lucky ones. Even though I grew up in a single parent home, my mother was single and worked hard, but we lived in poverty. We didn't have much on the reservation. But my grandparents provided what I needed. My mother tried her best and taught me a lot of good values as well. But in reality, we need that when we're young, so, but because when you're older, you try to find it. This world's so, at times it's ruthless. So then we've never had that. So we don't feel comfortable in our own skin. So when we're singing in front of the camera or when we're in front of people, we're not confident because we're looking for that acknowledgement. But I think when we have that acknowledgement when we're young, when we're older, we just are natural. We sing and we dance just like our grandparents taught us or our parents. So it's a natural thing. So people realize they connect to that and they want to be part of that. And so it's important for us to encourage one another and not to ridicule one another. And it's okay to correct somebody, but do it with an intention. Do it as a good relative, not as somebody that wants to hurt someone, So
Yeah. You mentioned your upbringing, single mom, poverty. We ate at my grandparents' house like 5 nights a week, and I thought it was because we just wanted to see them because we love them, and it was because mom didn't have dinner.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the core of family, and I had no idea that we were poor until I was like 14 because I had everything and a great life and a backyard and a brother to beat on and love everywhere.
Yeah.
So these relationships are invaluable. They're priceless.
Yeah.
And so now I find myself super anti. I have like 15 kids that aren't mine, and I love every single one of them. And a few of them will take care of me when I get old.
Yeah.
Let's assume the end of summer, everybody's back to powwowing. Will social distance powwow continue?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I don't think at the end of the summer the powwows are going to kick back up. To be honest, we'll be lucky if 2021 is when powwows come back.
Hey, how am I going to snag if I can't get myself to the powwow? Okay.
Social distance powwow. That's the place to snag.
What am I gonna do? So I like your regalia. What's your name? Hey, I can't. That's so. I guess I can. All right, never mind. Thank you. Problem solved.
Yeah, we got to go to virtual snagging for a year. So.
VS are you going to make the new app? You'd make $1 million off virtual snagging app. You don't swipe right or left. You swipe A.
There you go.
So is your work right now working with children and the youth inhibited by this quarantine? Are you kind of able to get back out there with the kids right now?
No, I mean, we're usually the summertime is a time for us we have 15 passenger vans. We have about 20 of them. And we go around the city and we pick up all those kids and we take them into the Black Hills, go swimming, hiking. We teach them about all the sacred sites in our area, and we, just take care of them and develop a good rapport with them. But the difference now is we're only able to work with 1 or 2, maybe 3 at the max at a time. So we would go pick one up and go kind of like a big brothers, big sisters way. So we'd go pick them up, take them and whatever, go hike, go for a walk with them or riding bike or play a sport or enjoy the scenery, take them, then go get the next student. So it's a lot more work. But that's the way we got to do it for the time being to be safe. Yeah.
By the end of this summer, you're going to have like calves of steel.
Well, not me. As administrator, my time is done picking up students, but I'm the one that raises the money to keep our programs going and helping to help our program to sustainability and keep everything going. So I've earned myself that fun part of doing paperwork and reports and so on and so forth. But I miss the days of being able to be with the students,
No, those manila envelope cuts are serious.
Yes.
So I am there with you, my administrator.
The struggle is real.
The struggle is real. So I'd like to imagine that every program, there's a millionaire laying on a hammock, listening to my program, waiting to be inspired to help. So if people want to help you or help the powwow or help anything that you're doing, where can they harass you, stalk you, email you?
Yeah, we have for my my personal job, they can go to www.Rural America Initiatives. That's RURAL America Initiatives.org. We have a Facebook page as well, Rural America Initiatives. And then obviously social distance powwow. Pretty simple. We only have a Facebook page for now. We have a group page and a like page, but yeah, that's kind of where we're starting.
crazy. So are you alone in this? People got your back? I imagine, because to the fact that I had to put on makeup to do a radio interview with you was exhausting enough. So I can't imagine you say good morning to us, you do stuff during the day, and then you say good night. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. That's my life. To me, keeping busy keeps me out of trouble. And I think one of the things about sobriety is it makes you available in life. And so I'm able to make time for my family. It's just make time for my work and a social distance. So it's almost become a continuum of my life. It's just kind of my daily routine. It becomes a routine,
well,
and you're
after
available.
3 months, right? It has been a routine at this point.
Well, even before this, though, I was involved in other powwows. Like I'm heavily involved in Black Hills powwow here in Rapid City, South Dakota. Probably the third largest powwow in the country now, and I do a lot of promotion for them. And when the other powwows that I MC, when I'm asked to MC powwows, I promote their powwow. So it's like this. I was already doing this before COVID, and now that social distance powwow has happened, I put all the energy from all those other powwows, and I put them into social distance powwow.
Really, like I said, whatever you did, wherever the idea came from, that social distance powwow is my summertime native pride. What are my friends doing anchor? And when Gathering of the Nations got canceled, I sobbed. That's my big summer trip. Yeah. And so without that, where can I be native pride everywhere? So this was I know her. Hey, hey. It was such a soulful relief that I still have this. So I cannot thank you enough. Yakoke Cheeto.
Yeah, I mean, you asked who helps me. Well, I got to give a shout out to the behind the scenes, the other two co-founders, Dan Simons
with Wampum
Wear, and Stephanie Wampum Wear.
I'm writing this.
That's his company. Yep, Wampum Wear.
Wampum.
Yep, Wampum Wear, and then Stephanie Hebert. Those are the other two co-founders. But since I'm the MC and kind of the promoter, I'm always the one in the on the front lines, and everybody recognizes. But I think Dan and Stephanie, they really do a lot in the marketplace and promoting our Indigenous artists and making sure keeping it safe so that non-natives can't come on and sell Indigenous inspired artwork. They're trying to protect it.
Let's break that down. So I'm an Indigenous person, so whatever I make is Indigenous made. That is different from Indigenous inspired when a non-native sees, like, for example, a beautiful quilt from behind your head and decides they want to make something like it, but not it. That is native inspired, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think there's our Indigenous peoples, we already have we're so far behind Caucasian people or other people that have been involved in industrialization or that have a lot of money already. They're ahead of the curve. And so there's an act, actually, it's against the law for you to sell Indigenous inspired work in America. And so we're just enforcing that, and
are you serious? So I can get mad at all those people that try to do the stuff and things, but do it wrong. I can.
Yes.
Is it civilian arrest them?
Well, I mean,
you can start ticketing these fools?
Citizens arrest.
I'm serious. I'm going to start carrying around handcuffs, culturally appropriated. You're under arrest. I'm taking them all down. I didn't know I could do that.
Well, I mean, I think it's more if they're trying to sell it. I think if they're trying to sell it, it's against the law. But I mean, yeah, you're right.
I can't arrest them for trying to be native.
Yeah, no, that's not a law yet.
Because I was going to be the worst cop anybody's ever seen.
Hopefully someday we can make that a law that mascots and all that are done.
Man buns, illegal. Then we'll handle the mascots. And that's a whole other conversation, is continuing these racist symbols. But Whitney, Rencountre, we've blabbed for almost an hour, and it seems so effort, and it was just easy. So I want to do this again at some point. I want to check in with you. I am going to stalk your wife, and I think that would be a much easier on the eyes interview for me personally.
Yes.
I'm kidding.
Yes.
Um, and honestly, like any people that you come across, any issues, send them our way because we're community radio. We're non-commercial. We are
Yes.
take up half the state. So people are hungry for these issues and this honest content. And I
It's
work my
awesome.
butt off to give it to them. So
Awesome.
anytime you're like, this guy needs to be on the radio or this woman, let me know.
Sure.
I'll give
I
you
will.
I'll give you a assistant production credit
All right.
in really small font.
Yeah. Send your viewers our way to Social Distance Powwow.
Oh, we are going to. And that's the thing too. Like, there's been weird powwow rumors, and can somebody culturally appropriate our dancing on your site?
You know, it's almost seems like our site has become a community,
Cool.
and historically, good communities can police each other. You know what I mean? And it almost seems like if someone comes on and does something on our site that isn't integrity or culturally or traditionally valued, you know, people will report it. Sweet. And they'll get it off of our site on their own. So we don't even have to spend time policing and saying what's right or wrong. The people usually speak loud enough for us to say, okay,
yes,
bye-bye.
Yes, oh my gosh. Whitney, Rencountre, thank you so very much. Social Distance Powwow. Now, all the Facebooks, you said there's a page, a group. Give us all that info real quick.
Well, Social Distance Powwow, there's a like page, but that only has like 1,000 likes maybe. But the Social Distance Powwow group page, that's the one with the 192,000 members. And so that, yeah, go to both of those. Go like the page and then go to the group page and join.
And then talk about your organization one more time, because your shirt keeps disappearing. Yeah, this is the youth mentoring program that we have. It's called the Ate Api Youth Mentoring Program. But all you got to do is go to ruralamericainitiatives.org. That's the website, and you can see our program. We also have a Head Start program and an early Head Start program for the little ones. And then you can go to our Facebook page, Rural America Initiatives. That is amazing. Well, don't burn yourself out. If you do me a favor, I guess we can't high five anymore. Thank Dan and Stephanie for me personally and saving my summer. And go kiss Jessie and tell her I'm coming for her next.